All right, so tonight what we're going to look at is two pieces of animation. One of them using a cam mate, where we have a cam that spins and a piece that follows it. We're also going to look at how to animate a spring with that feature. And then the other animation we're going to look at is actually an animation that's mainly in the motion study version of this software. So the first one we're going to look at is this cam valve assembly. And let me show you what that looks like when it's running. And I have had some problems recently where it does this. So we'll do is we will create a new motion study. And I will go in, I'll zoom in here. I'll throw a motor on the shaft. We'll give it an RPM of 15. And we'll say okay. Run this out to 10 seconds. Let it calculate. Honestly, I think some of this might be the fact that I need to restart my computer and let it clean its memory out a little bit. We've been having a few glitchy problems here. So, and some of these videos have taken a little longer than they typically would. So let's see what this looks like here. All right, so this will take a little bit of time. All right, so let's see. There we go. Still is a little jumpy, but you can see the cam spinning around, pushing the valve down, the spring compressing. All right, so that's the first motion study we're going to look at. The second one is this one right here. Essentially what this is just an example of gravity. So, and how you can use gravity and set up impacts and things like that in this motion study. So pretty simple. All right. So let's start off. Let's do the cam version first. So we'll go in here and we're going to start a new part. All right. And so the first part we're going to build is going to be the rod assembly for this, or the valve assembly. So what we want to do is we'll start with the top plane. We'll sketch. I'm going to sketch a circle, bring it out, smart dimensions. Let's make this 50. All right, and then we're gonna say, okay, go to feature, extrude base, and let's extrude it up 10. All right, and now we're gonna go to this face. We're gonna sketch again. We'll go normal. I'm gonna draw in another circle here. Smart dimensions, make this 10. Say okay. Let's go to features, extruded boss base. Let's extrude that out to, say okay. Check. I'm going to click on that face. I'm going to sketch. Draw a third circle here. Going to draw this one out. Go smart dimensions. And we'll make that 30. All right. And we'll go to features, extruded boss base, and we'll extrude that out 10. Say okay. All right, so we're going to spin around here. Let's add some nicer features to this. So we're going to give a fillet cut to it. Let's fill this inside piece here. Let's go 15. that and see how that looks. That looks good. Say okay. And then let's go and we'll call that good. Let's go in, we'll look at our materials. And we're gonna go down here, we're gonna make this plain carbon steel. We'll say okay. We'll say save. And let's save this to we'll save it here as this valve assembly. We'll say save. All right. So the next piece we're going to build is going to be the bushing. Pretty simple piece. So some of the values that we wanted to remember from that camshaft were the top piece was 30 in diameter and the shaft itself was 10 in diameter. So let's go top plane again, sketch. Draw ourselves a circle here. Smart dimension. Make that 30. We'll do extruded boss base. Let's make that 5. And say okay. Go to this face, sketch, normal. Draw another circle here. Gonna draw it out here. Smart dimensions. Make this 15. And we'll say feature, extruded boss base. We'll extrude this up 20. And we'll say okay. And then we'll draw one final hole in a circle. Exit. We want to go onto here. I'm going to go sketch. Draw this here. Smart dimensions. Make that 10. And we'll say okay. Feature. We'll do extruded cut. And we'll say through wall. And we'll say okay. All right. So there we go. Let's go in here. We'll go to bushing. We'll go to material. Let's go down to edit material so that we can choose one here. We'll go to a copper alloy and we'll go down here and we'll go to bronze. Apply, close. All right, we have bronze now. And so we'll save this part. And we'll save this part as the bushing. So save. All right, and this last piece we want to make is the cam. So we'll go, we'll say new part, say okay. We want to go on this front plane. Now let's sketch on the front plane. Front plane, let's sketch. We're going to draw in a center line. And we're going to draw our first circle here. Going to be the bigger part of our cam. Smart dimensions. Make this 90. 100. Say okay. Draw our second part. Smart dimensions. Make this 60. Say okay. And then we're gonna draw some tangent lines here. All right. So, all right, and we'll say, click on that line. Escape. Click on this line, push control, click on the circle, tangent, line, circle, tangent, line, circle, tangent, and line, circle, tangent. And we'll say okay. And then we'll go up here to trim entities, trim that off. trim those guys out, trim those guys out. That, those, that, and that. And that should give us our piece. I'm gonna say okay. Go to feature. We want to extrude our boss base. Let's extrude our boss base on both sides. So we'll say mid plane, and we'll make this 20. And we'll say okay. All right, and let's go back to front plane. Draw another sketch here. Go normal to that front plane. This will be the shaft for the motor. Smart dimensions, pull out here, and we'll make this 60. All right, and we'll say okay. And then we'll go extruded boss base. We want to go mid plane again. And then let's make this 60. And we'll say okay. And we spin around there. There we go. There's our cam. Now let us select materials for this. Make this plain carbon steel as well. So save. And we'll save it as our cam. Say save. All right. So we've got that. Let's go in here. We are going to go, I'm going to go to new, and go to assembly, and say okay. And we will bring in let's bring in the bushing. All right, so we brought in the bushing first, so it should be fixed. And so we're going to do our first mate here. We're going to choose the rod and the valve here. We'll mate with that, and then the inside of that face, go concentric, and say okay. You can see that makes the rod slide inside that bushing. And then we want to go and we will make this valve. We'll go and we'll choose these features here. We'll want to drop down the cam and the valve and the bushing. And so we'll want to go with the cam. We'll go front plane, and we'll mate that front plane with the valve assembly. And then we can say okay. You can see this, those two front planes will stay together. And then we want to go and we want to mate the turn on our temporary axes. And we will mate this axis with the bushing right plane. Or front plane. Say okay. That lines that up. And then we want to go origin of the bushing to origin of the cam. and we'll give this a distance. And we'll say our distance is, let's look at 150. Let's make that 200. All right, and we'll say okay. So if we exit out of here, and we drop that down, we spin our cam body around. Now here is the first of the new mates that we are going to work on. We'll call it mate. We'll go to mechanical mates. We'll go to cam. First thing you want to choose is the face of the cam. And then you want to choose the follower. All right. And then we say okay. We'll say okay. If we go back here and zoom out a little bit, you can see that makes the cam follow along. All right, so the final part of this that we want to make is the spring. So to do the spring, we want to, let's turn off our temporary axes. We don't need those right now. And we will go to front plane of the bushing. Go normal to the front plane of the bushing. And we will I'm going to say insert component, new part. Bring it in here. We'll click in here. All right. And that gives us a new part down here, down at the bottom here. And this new part assembly, let's drop it down. Let's see where its front plane is at. Its front plane is a little behind the front plane for the bushing. So let's go and we'll make a mate here. Let's actually first, let's click on this part and we want to tell it to float. And then we'll do a mate. We'll say, we'll drop down here. And we'll say front plane of our bushing is going to line up with the front plane of our new part. And we'll say okay. And we'll say okay. So now when we do front plane, we spin it around. We run through there. Okay. So what we want to do here is we want to right click on this assembly part and we want to go up to the edit part. And then we want to go to front plane and we want to sketch. So let's go normal to that front plane and we'll zoom in. All right. So what we want to do here is we want to draw a line. We want that line to start at the top, right below that plate that's going to contact the camshaft, right? And we want to bring that down to the top surface of that bushing, all right? And then we say escape. And you see that this line is now fully defined because these two parts are known in this assembly. Okay. So we have that sketch. That sketch is associated with that front plane. And then we're going to right click on there again. Oh, wait, hold on. We'll say okay. Save it. I'm going to right click on that front plane again. I'm going to do a new sketch. This new sketch is going to be a circle. And it's going to be off of this piece here. Move smart dimensions. Click on it, we'll pull off, we'll make it a 6. Say okay. And then we'll go here to the origin, drop down. Honestly, let's make that 11.25 because that actually looks really good where it's at. We'll say okay. And then we will back out of this. All right, so we're back into this. We haven't closed out of our edit part. We're back to this screen here. Now we want to go to features and we want to go swept boss base. The feature that we're going to sweep is this circle. So it's selected that, all right, and we're going to sweep it around this center line we drew. So there's our sketch one. We want to go to options. We want to go to specify twist value. We want to tell it that we're using revolutions. And then let's look at our revolutions and see how 5 looks. Five actually doesn't look too bad. Let's say okay. All right, so we've got a spring on here. So now let's go back to our front plane. We'll go normal to our front plane. We're going to do one last sketch here. So right click on our front plane, go to sketch. And we want to zoom in here. We're going to choose rectangle. I'm going to go up. I'm going to draw our rectangle here. And then we're going to zoom in down here on the bottom and draw a rectangle here. Okay, we'll say okay. We want to go to features and we want to do extruded cut. And what we'll do here is we'll just do 2 directions. And we will say through all both. And we'll say okay. And what that does is it just trims the bottom of that spring off. So it gives it a nice flat surface. Okay. All right, we're done with that. We're done with that part. So now we can exit back out. And you can see here, if we move our cam, the spring doesn't shrink until we tell it to rebuild. And then it does. And see? And you can see also here what I was talking about where we cut the nice flat surface there where it would fit against it. And we say rebuild. And there we go. Okay, so our spring is moving. And just the way this works is when you do your motion study, every frame that you make in this, as it moves around, it rebuilds the geometry of this whole thing. So we've got this here. Let's save it. And we'll save it as cam 3. It's not going to like that because we built this part here, part 4, assembly 3. So let's and what you would do to get around that is you could change that name. But we're just going to say save all, and we'll just save it as assembly 3. We'll say all right. Okay. So we just saved this cam. Now we're going to go into it and we're going to do a motion study. So let's zoom in here and pull up. There we go. All right. And so we'll go to motion study. We're going to put a motor on this, rotary motor. We're going to put it on this shaft right here. And we are going to give it a rotation per minute of 20. Say okay. And drag this out so we get 12 seconds. Say okay. And we click calculate. Like I said before, we were getting a little bit of choppiness in this, and I think it's probably my processor right now is struggling a little bit. I think I need to let things cool down and rest a little bit. Well, let's see how that turned out. Yeah, and you can see it's a little glitchy still. But we can see the main part of it, and it's pushing down, it's compressing the spring, and the valve is, the whole assembly is moving. So I think I need to maybe change some of my settings a little bit to smooth that out a little bit. But either way, the functionality and the idea of this works. So, and you can see that that's how you make a spring. And like I said, this isn't, there's a spring function in here for adding spring to components to make them bounce, but it's not the same as spring that you can see move up and down like this. So, but in this case, like I said, this spring is essentially just being redrawn in relationship to that line, that first line we drew. And we drew that line so it connects to the base of at the base of the bushing here, and at the top, the base of this plate right here. And as this shaft goes up and down, it changes that length of that line. And this spring is related to the length of that line. So as that line changes, the shape of this spring changes, because remember that this spring is just an extruded, it's a swept boss base around this line. So as that line shortens, the angles of this turn change, because it still has to be 5 rotations around every time. And that's how the program draws a spring. So, okay, so that's our first part. That's our spring. Okay, so the second part we're going to look at, and like I said, is we're going to look at not assembly 3, assembly 2, if you remember. And it's this gravity assembly, right? Okay, so this one's a pretty simple one. We're going to go in. We're going to need three parts for this. So we're going to go into our parts. We're going to say, okay, first part we want to draw is that the track that everything's going to go onto. So we'll go to front plane, say sketch. Let's draw ourselves. Actually, don't need. Let's draw a reference line here. Okay, and we'll say escape. And then we're going to draw in a reference line here. Let's see if we can do this with a reference line. I think we can. Actually, you know, it's late enough right now. I am fine with, we'll just draw on a solid line. I know it works. All right, here's our solid line. All right, so down here at the bottom, what I want to do is let us choose a 3-point arc. Escape. And I want to choose this point, and choose this point, and we'll say that they're horizontal to each other. So that reference is there. And then we'll go smart dimensions, choose here to here. We'll make about 15, which is okay. And then let's choose here to this line, smart dimensions here to this line. And we'll make this 90. And say okay. All right, so now we're gonna click this line, and do an offset. Let's do an offset of 2. And we'll give it capped ends, and we'll arc our cap ends. Say, okay, how do we like that, right? So we say, okay. So that gives us this little U shape. Now we're going to take this U shape, and we're going to go to features. We're going to do a sweat boss base. We have this whole piece is, let's just exit out of this. Rebuild. Sweat boss base. Oh, I know why it's doing it. Damn it. I'm gonna go here. We're gonna edit this sketch. And we'll delete this line. I'm gonna say yes. And then we're gonna go to front plane. I'm gonna do a new sketch. New sketch in the front plane. That's our sketch 2. I'm gonna take our line here, origin. And we're gonna go up and say escape. And we're going to smart dimensions. Let's make this 500. Say okay. It's gonna be a long one. Say escape. Okay, you got that. So now we can go down here. We can redraw everything. We go sketch 1. We can go sweat boss base. Likes that. And sweep around sketch 2. Okay, I'm gonna say options. I'm gonna say profile twist, specific twist values. We're going to give it revolutions. And let's see what 7 looks like. Oh, that's pretty good. All right. So this is our path. Let's save this. I'm going to save this in week 6. And we're going to make a new folder. And we're going to call this Marble Drop. Say open. And we'll say path. Okay. So there's our path. Our next thing we're going to draw, actually, let's say cancel real quick. Let's go to our sweat box. We'll go to sketch 1. I want to look at this real quick. So our radius of our path is 15. So we have a diameter of 30. So let's make sure that when we make our ball, we make it 20 or 25. So we'll say part. We'll go front plane, sketch as our origin, and do our line here, right? Back to it, to it, there, so escape. We will select here, control, select there, coincident. And then we will smart dimension off of here. Like I said, we need to make that 25. So we'll say 25, say okay. And then we want to go feature, and we want to do revolve boss base. And the axis we want to rotate it around is there. And go to our axis and say okay. There we go. Shiny ball. And so we save this as ball 2. And I'm saving it as path 2 and ball 2 because we already have that other example open, and a lot of times it doesn't like it when you have parts that are named the same thing, even though they might be in different folders. All right, so we've got the ball and we've got the path. Now all we need to do is make the dish that everything goes into. So we've got one new part. Say okay. We'll go top plane, sketch, draw a circle. Let's do smart dimension. So 200. Okay. Feature, extruded boss base. Let's extrude this up 45. Say okay. And go here. And let's go front plane, sketch. Go normal to our front plane. All right. And let's put in an axis here. Say okay. Okay, we're going to draw this. So say okay. Go smart dimensions here. Pull this up. Let's make that an even 90. Let's say, let's make it a 95. Be a little wild today, huh? 95. Say okay. And then let's go smart dimensions. We'll pull this down and make this a, we pulled that up to 45. So let's make this a 40. There we go. Gives us a nice deep well there. Let's say okay. All right, and then we want to go to feature, and we want to do a revolve cut. And the axis of revolution is there, and we say okay. And if we tip up here, we see that we just cut that out. And we say all right. Okay, so let's go this face here. I'm gonna do a sketch on this face. Let's go normal to it. And we want to draw some quick lines here. So we'll go here to there. Say escape. And then we'll do another line over here. Be here to here. Say escape. And we want to do some converting entities. Pick you, you, and you. So, okay. And then we want to trim our entities. That worked exactly how I wanted it to. So convert entities, that line, that line. There we go. That's what I wanted to do. Say okay. And then we want to go to feature, extrude boss base. Let's flip this down a little bit. That looks about right. Maybe not quite that high. Let's go 20. That should be enough. And we'll say okay. And there we go. There's our piece. Okay, so we're going to say save. We're going to go in here. We'll call this dish 2. And say save. All right. And then we'll go here, say new assembly. We'll say okay. And bring in dish 2. Insert our components now. We have ball 2. And we have path 2. Okay. So that's fixed. Now what we want to do is let's take a look at our path and which planes we have to mess with. So we've got the right plane there. And then let's look at our dish here. I think our front plane and our right plane on those two. So we'll say mate. And we'll say front plane. Right plane. Here, hold on a second. We had something selected there already. I'm changing our angle here. Maybe trying to get this to line up so it will look nice. So that should work. Say okay. Bring it up here. All right. Let's choose that and this face and go tangent. and then we'll lock them in place. By doing that, hopefully, if we don't get any errors here, we're able to make it so those two now hold on to each other. Okay. Because if you don't do that, and you turn gravity on and things are all messed up, you can get it so that it does some goofiness. Like the track will tip over and things like that. All right. Silly cat. All right. What we're going to do here is, so if you push control and then select something, you can get a duplicate of it. So that's all I did here. And what I'm going to do is cause a tiny bit more chaos down at the end of the track when we're done with all of this. Okay, so we got the two balls in. Let's zoom to where we can see everything here. And we will rotate a little bit. How about that right there? Okay, so now we'll go into our motion study. And there's a few features here we need to do in our motion study. So the first thing we want to do is, instead of animation over here, we want to go to basic motion. So that's our first step. Our second step is we need to turn gravity on. So for whatever reason, it comes in with gravity selected as your Z component, which seems silly. So we're going to change it to the Y component so it's pointing down. We're sticking with a standard Earth gravity right here. And then we say OK to gravity. And then the final thing we need to do is we need to turn contact on for all of the bodies. So we say OK to that. Say OK. That turns contact on for all of the bodies. Now we'll stretch this out. Let's let it run maybe 15 seconds. All right. So let's calculate. All right, and there we go. Let me push play. And see the marbles chase each other down the track. And they get down to the bottom, they roll around in the dish, and they settle out down in the bottom. So the step we were forgetting during class was to turn contact on for everything. Once you do that, and to switch this over to basic motion instead of animation. Once you do that, then your pieces, when they run into each other, it actually causes contact versus just dropping straight through like we were having before. So that's what we have going on. That was the track with two marbles rolling down it into a dish. And we had the cam spinning and moving up and down a spring with a valve. And like I said, maybe I'll restart my computer and kind of get everything running and clean. And during class next week, I can show you that running a little bit smoother. But the basic idea you can get there of how that cam works, how the cam feature works. So if you have a body and another body, you can make them follow each other. It doesn't have to be a spinning cam like that either. It can be any other sort of any other sort of surface that you want a stylus to follow or something like that. So we can look at a little bit of that as well. And then the final thing I was going to talk to you guys about was looking at some different gear types for for next week. But I think what I'll do is I'll post a second video, because what I was going to look at is under the power transmission here and gears, something that we hadn't really looked at were these rack and pinion gears. So I think what I'll do is I will pull up a little bit of rack and pinion gear video, and I will put that together over the next day or so, and I'll show that to you guys as well.